Subscribe to Teckoh on YouTube or you will forever be a bot at Fortnite.
What is up, guys, and welcome back to another video. So in today's video, I'll be going over some box fighting tips that are fairly easy but super effective. These tips are going to be some of my personal favorites that I've used over time that I recommend for beginner to intermediate level players, as they're not too mechanically difficult but really help you a lot. But with that said, and without further ado, let's just hop straight into it. But as I said, boys, we're hopping into creative now, and I want to clarify that the premise of this video is going to be tips that are fairly easy to do and also provide really good results. So I'm not going to be showing any brand new over-the-top techniques. I'm actually going to be showing mostly techniques that I've shown in other videos before, but techniques that work extremely well. But yeah, guys, so either way, whether you've watched my videos before and seen some of these tips or not, these are going to be the best tips that I recommend you start using. But anyway, boys, for the first tip, this one's definitely one of those like old tips that still works really well, and I really don't see a single person using this anymore. I'm telling you guys, I literally use this all the time. This is one of the most overpowered techniques in the game, and it's been around for a while, so I'm surprised that people aren't really using it as much anymore. And if you've been an OG viewer of my channel, you've definitely seen this one before, but basically what it consists of is you're going to be boxed up and your opponent's going to be outside, kind of like this. Obviously, they're going to be pushing you. Alright, so as you boys can see, that's kind of what the general gist of this technique is. So basically what the goal is you're trying to time it. You're trying to time your shot right as your opponent breaks your wall. And essentially, if you can get that timing shot off, you can hit them for pretty much, massive damage. And overall, it's just a really good technique. So the way this actually works is kind of like this. Every time you take a wall in Fortnite, there's a very, very small delay between the time this wall actually breaks and the time your wall actually places. I think it's like 0.15 seconds or something like that. Don't quote me on that. But basically, we're just abusing that little time, that little delay that Fortnite has that they basically force on everybody. This works whether your opponent is 0 ping or 100 ping, and basically abusing that to get a shot off. So obviously this is more of a defensive technique when your opponent's pushing you instead of you pushing them, as you can very clearly see. So just to demonstrate it one last time, that's pretty much what it looks like. It'll take a bit for you to get the timing down perfectly. Obviously, I'm a bit rusty right now. I haven't got it down perfectly, but I'm definitely doing okay with it. But yeah, guys, that's pretty much the gist of that first technique. It's honestly really easy once you get the hang of it. As you can see, I'm definitely a bit rusty with it right now, I'm not gonna lie, but you know, it's still super OP. You can still kind of see how it works, and overall, if you can get good at this and start pulling it off in game, then it's gonna be honestly insane. This is definitely one of the techniques I've been using for the longest, and it's honestly the most OP technique I've used. Anyway though, moving into our second technique, this is going to be another technique that I use literally almost every single game, almost every single fight, as a matter of fact, and it's one of the most basic plays you can make. So all you have to do for this play is you obviously have to be on offense right here, and what you're basically going to be doing is taking your opponent's wall, you're going to be editing a top right sort of triangle edit, and you're going to be sliding a cone into their box, quickly resetting it, and you kind of have this piece control on them now. But yeah, from there, guys, all you got to do is just edit it however you want. What I'll typically do is just keep this edit here, and then I'll basically just have this easy peek on them. But as you can see, your opponent really can't do anything, and you have this full sort of range of, I guess, being able to see them. So here's what it might look like in full speed doing the technique. Obviously, he was sort of clipbotting for me there, if you want to call it that, but you can see how that kind of works. Overall, this technique is honestly insane. It gives you such a good angle on your opponent, and it basically gives you full control of the fight. And obviously, from your opponent's perspective, it's going to be really hard for them to hit you if you peek correctly, and if they're trying to edit out of any side of the box, then they have to face away from you, free shot for you, and basically you can clean up the fight really easily if you can manage to get that piece control on them. Alright, boys, and on the topic of cones, I want to talk about cones versus ramps real quick. I guess you can kind of consider this a tip, but I kind of just want to go over this really quick because this is something that a lot of you guys ask me about. If you're wondering about when you should be using a cone versus when you should be using a ramp, then this section is basically perfect for you. So there's a few different situations in which I recommend using each of these. So cones are going to be the general sort of piece that I recommend using the most in box fights. Obviously, my reason being for that is that say you have your opponent like coned off in a box like this, there is really nowhere that they can escape. Like, they cannot get away from you. They're gonna get absolutely clowned on, dumped on, boxed like a fish, and it's over for them. But one of the biggest downfalls of using a ramp is obviously that, say you get a ramp in somebody's box, you do the Mongrel Classic on them, it's super easy for them to just boop, edit down, and they're gone. So with that in mind, there are a few places that I'd recommend using ramps, and the first place is going to be when your opponent's basically completely caught off guard. So let's just say, for sake of example, we're in an end game, right? And I'm kind of right here, I'm next to him, and he has no idea that I'm here, right? What I'll do is I'll just get in with the ramp. Obviously, that fully exposes him. It's easy to get the kill. On the other hand, though, if he knows I'm here, I'm going to have to go for really good peeks, and I'm not going to be able to just get in, which is why I recommend using the cone instead when your opponent knows you're there and expects you to do it. And that way you can go for these insane peeks, get some good shots off, but obviously you're not going to be as exposed. Basically what I'm saying here is that when your opponent expects you, I recommend using a cone because you can still get really good peeks. And when your opponent, say they're looking out that side, they're shooting at another player, whatever, end game, you know how it goes, and you're just trying to get straight in, get that impact frag, then boom, you edit in that way and do that. Otherwise, if they know you're there, then you'll want to use the cone. And another thing worth mentioning is elevation. As I said before, it's really easy for your opponent to kind of just edit out if you Mongrel Classic them or something like that with a ramp and they're above ground, kind of like this. Boom, you do that and they just edit down as I showed you before. So I would be wary of using that when you're obviously on high elevation. In that situation where you're kind of just diving in and just getting straight into their box, it's fine to use a ramp, especially if it's like end game and they're distracted by something else. But if they know you're there and if you're in like a legit box fight, then I would definitely recommend using cones as opposed to ramps. That's just so they can't edit out, and so you kind of force them into that situation where they're inevitably going to obviously get mopped. That's because cones just really don't give them a way out, while ramps just have that sort of bailout that they can kind of just edit down and boom, they're gone. Anyway though, for our fourth tip on this list, I want to show you a sort of piece control technique that I've been using a bunch lately that really seems to work against players. So what I'll typically do to start off this technique is I'll go in front of somebody's box and I'll put two cones up, one on the left side and one on the right side, kind of in this formation. And from there, I'll go and put some pressure on this wall right in front of me, just like this. And what I'm trying to get them to do is edit out to this side. So let's just say I'm putting this pressure on him. He's obviously trying to get out of his box because he doesn't want to get absolutely boxed like a fish. What I'll do is I'll edit out to this side and box him just like that. So this is a super easy way to get piece control on your opponent, assuming they do it that way. But if they do decide to edit out to another side, then what I'll typically do is I'll just go back up and do the exact same thing again. So let's just say he edits out the back side of this box instead of editing out the side. What I can do is I can even like box him like this if I can get ahead of him. Boom, he's obviously completely exposed. Or if he does manage to build his entire box and kind of get himself controlled. And otherwise, what I'll do if he manages to get his box, he's all good, then I'll just continue the same technique. So I'll put the pressure on him. If he edit out that side, you know, kind of like that. I can even use this other technique that I just showed. I kind of just instinctively use that. I use that one quite a bit. But yeah, you guys get what I mean. So basically the general technique here is putting pressure on their wall, trying to get them to edit out to this side, boxing them in. If they don't actually edit out to that side, then you'll just want to go and basically repeat it or find another opportunity to get piece control. But anyway, boys, our fifth technique up in this video is going to be sort of like a side jump piece control technique. It's a bit weird, but it's basically something I recommend doing when your opponent is right above you. But as I said, this is sort of like a piece control technique you can use when somebody is pushing your box from above. What I'll essentially do here is I'm going to be editing out to the side, and basically right as I exit my box, I'm going to be tossing this wall up here. So obviously I don't want them to just jump on me, so you're going to place your ramp and you're just going to instantly try to get that wall up. From there, you're going to edit through just with a simple window, box them in, and boom, 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 and they get absolutely floored. Alright boys, so in slower motion, it'll just look like this. Basically, as I said, I'll edit out the little wall up here. I'll edit through that wall, place the cone up, and then you have the option whether or not you want to box them all the way in. I typically will, just because I'm more mechanical, I'm able to do that. But you don't have to box them in either. The cone is definitely going to be enough to keep them there for a second. Basically, this is just a really good way to sort of turn the momentum of the fight and get some aggression going. As well as that, you can really hit some fat shots if you manage to obviously pull it off correctly. It is a pretty difficult technique, but it's one that I strongly recommend using to catch your opponent off guard when they're playing aggressive. Another variation of this technique that I like doing is kind of just going like this and then going out to the side and boxing them in. Obviously, that looks way more advanced and it's definitely not an easy technique, but basically they're on top of your box, you're just editing out, doing this, and then going out to the side to get another angle on them, boxing them in. Overall, this is just used to sort of turn the tides of the fight and get a good shot on your opponent and maybe even get them boxed. Obviously, when you're in a situation where you're below your opponent like that, you never want to just sit there and do nothing. So even if you don't manage to get shots off on them, at least you'll be able to turn the fight. And obviously, if you pull off the technique and they decide to move, then you can either go up and push your height, or you can say they go out to like the side, they go out to your right side. You can do that same exact technique I showed earlier. But yeah, boys, so that's going to be all the tips for this video. Now, what I recommend doing is sort of going into your own creative map and sort of practicing these on your own for a while. Apart from that pre-fire technique that I showed at the beginning, all of these should be possible to practice just on your own. As a quick recap, the 5 techniques that we covered are 1, that little pre-fire sort of technique when somebody breaks your wall, boom, you shoot. The second technique we covered was pushing somebody's box, getting that cone in there, and then using it to peek. Third up, we covered when you should use a ramp, like the Mongrel Classic, versus when you should use like a cone. Fourth up was that little trick technique where you try to take your opponent's wall and then box them in if they edit out. Obviously, if they don't edit out to that side, you just go back, follow them, either do the technique again, or chase them and try to get other piece control on them. And then finally, fifth up was that counter. Whenever somebody's above your box, you go up, piece control them, and boom. And as a side note for that last technique, you can also use it as a sort of way to push height. If this doesn't work out, if they either move or if they're just not able to be shot, then you can obviously keep going back up or go for other piece control on them as well. But yeah, boys, that's going to wrap it up for our 5 tips. But with all of that said, guys, that's going to wrap it up for today's video. If you enjoyed the video and can see yourself using some of these tips, then be sure to drop a like on it and subscribe if you want to see more content just like this in the future. Anyway, though, thank you all for watching this video, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye for now.